privilege of presenting to you the speaker who will deliver our special address this evening. This year's Union Budget placed tremendous focus on infrastructure development. Who better to speak about this than the man at the helm of India's largest infrastructure giant, Mr. S.N. Subrahmanyan, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of L&T, a $21 billion conglomerate with over 80 years of experience being builders of the nation, engaged in core high-impact sectors of the economy with integrated capabilities that span the entire spectrum of design to deliver. A civil engineer with a postgraduate degree in business management, SNS, as he's popularly known, joined L&T in 1984 as a project planning engineer and rose quickly through the company. Prior to taking over as managing director in 2017, he headed the construction business of the group, which is now among the top 15 contractors globally and India's largest construction organization. As MD and CEO, SNS leads the varied businesses of L&T with an almost missionary zeal. He places a premium on forging and building enduring relationships with customers. According to him, this is one of the key determinants of success in the modern world of enterprises. SNS is also passionate about innovation, project management, and talent development, particularly in leadership roles. A member on various eminent industry bodies and construction councils and institutions, SNS has several awards and recognitions to his name. CEO of the Year by CNBC Awards in 2020, Emergent CEO awarded by CEO Awards in 2019 for his exemplary leadership and delivering seamless growth to L&T, 13th in the 2019 Construction Week Power 100 list, Contractor CEO of the Year at the Qatar Contractors Forum Awards function at Doha in 2014, Infrastructure Person of the Year 2012. The list goes on. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. S.N. Subrahmanyan.
Yeah, good evening to all of you at United Way Chennai. I think I saw Meenakshi speaking, but I could not hear her. I hope she was introducing me, and I guess and hope she said a few nice things about me. Having said that, I want to also thank Mr. Mahalingam, an old well-wisher who ensured that I was available today, and also to Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan, who's a family friend. Pleasure to be at United Way and in this webinar and to understand what and all you have been doing and what are the things that you are planning to do in various aspects of social welfareness. The topic given to me is a bit of an extreme. It's called the era of extremes. I'm not sure with eminent speakers like Deepak Parekh and others before me whether I do justice to this, but let me try to get on with the topic in my own little way. I'll first cover certain aspects of international as we see it in Larsen and Toubro, something about the budget, and as we look at it at the pointers. It is an era of extremes because there's a lot of uncertainty around and a lot of confusion around. I'll put straight thoughts onto the talk instead of giving a proper talk, because I think that's what the era of extremes means. The most important thing as we look at is how the trade war between the United States and China finally pans out, whether Trumpism is over or whether some effects and lingers of it is going to continue. The after effects of it, we see the Chinese impatience. They are at our borders still. Some coolness has occurred yesterday, but I don't know where it leads to. When we come into our important markets, what I say is important because we were, as an organization and many others, were importing things from China. We were dependent on China for the simple reason that it offered economies of scale and good prices, and maybe some aspects of technology. Now, with this intrusion at the border, all that has changed, and we got to look at the world in a different manner. And in our case, many of the things that we're doing there, we had to shift it back to India and other places to get it done. And that required a lot of logistics and supply chain management. One of the important markets that we have is Middle East. Qatar is still not opened up, though there has been some reapproachment between Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. But it's globally a very rich country and very important market. Saudi Arabia is still strengthening itself, and how the match between the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iran will play out, one needs to see, because that can flare up at any time. That has also led to the war in Yemen, and we need to see how that is cooled down. There's also a new regime in Oman, in the sense the previous Sultan had passed away, and one of his family members have taken over. It's a stable country, very friendly country, and we've got to see how things pan out in Oman. The ambivalence in Sri Lanka is another factor that worries us, because that's a neighbor very close to us, and any activity which is not akin to our nationhood is always a worry. There's a smell of nationalism everywhere, including in our country. In many cases, it is good. In some cases, we have to look at it at a different eye. We have also not been in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Trade Partnership, the RCEP as we call it, for reasons which are genuine. But we are now out of many trade blocks, and one needs to think whether that is the right way to go from an overall point of view. We have also not been part of the OBAR for reasons of nationalistic, justified reasons. But what that has done is brought in a lot of money into Pakistan, maybe indebted the nation, but it has developed the OBAR road as well as huge power infrastructure and various other infrastructure development in Pakistan, which otherwise would not have happened. Economically, Bangladesh is doing very well. It's got one of the fastest growing GDPs in this part of the world. The new factor is, we thought Myanmar was growing up economically. They found gas, etc. there. Suddenly there's instability there. And one needs to understand how that will finally pan out. On the other side of the globe, the data protection rights, the way the social media works, provokes, and ensures its own laws and such. And as one always knows it, the heavy disruption that is taking place to the existing order of business because of the growth of the e-com world, where anything can be disrupted now with a new entity coming in and declaring itself as e-com. And they're doing good business too. As we look at the world over the last few decades, what we have found is, really speaking, there are only two economies which really did well from a GDP growth point of view, which is China and India to a large extent. And in our opinion, that will continue to be there. That will continue to be there in all forms. If you look at our own part of the world, which is India, we look at even this year, on the quarter one, I think the manufacturing just about managed, whereas on the second quarter, I guess manufacturing has come back in certain aspects, but the services side is done extremely well, which is also led by the vaccine. It's also a fact that most service companies could adapt to work from home, work from anywhere, work from nowhere, and get it going. Whereas organizations like us, which depended on physical activity, found it difficult to move. Just to broad base it as an example, as an organization, we employ about 280 to 290,000 laborers at any given point of time in the EPC projects business. Just prior to January, February, Holi took place, and also maybe some effects of pandemic were seen, and this number came down to about 160, 170,000. During the pandemic period, April to June, July, August, we held the laborers in our various site camps, facilities, labor colonies. And then the migration took place, and now we remobilized back about 280, 290,000 laborers. So our labor strength went down to about 60, 70,000 at the end of July, August. And we had to remobilize 300,000. We had to remobilize it back to 280, 290,000. That's a huge effort that went in, which also shows how the labor force in the country is distributed. Generally speaking, the quality of physical work that is created, the capex spending that is more there in the south, west, and to some extent north. And therefore, much of the labor comes from the eastern part of the country. And once they go back, it does affect the economy in many ways more than one. And to get them back is an effort by itself. But what happens in all this is that an established good labor, which you have for a long time, disappears, and you get in new laborers, retraining them, getting them back to work, productivity, etc. It's an extreme, and one has to see how to keep on doing it to keep ourselves chugging, and thereby the organization and I guess what is true for us is also true for many other organizations in the same space and in similar kinds of industries. World over, including in India, we've seen unprecedented fiscal stimulus and very accommodative monetary policies. In our country, it includes the various measures which was announced by the government time and again, the RBI policies, in our view, a very blockbuster budget, and which gave rise to some physical indiscipline, but I guess it was required and it was need of the time. Otherwise, we would not have moved as a country, as an organization, because there's an absolute need to create projects and create jobs, and therefore it was a must to do that. If you look at some kind of recovery in the United States, all of us talk about it because it's a very important global market still. It is led by goods consumption, software, and residential boom. And that could be a foretender of what is going to happen in many other countries too, including India. The India growth is followed by some amount of reforms that has happened. I wouldn't say some serious reforms that had happened. Debatable by some, but in our view, it was all very good. The IBC Act, the GST, one country, one tax, the RERA Act on the real estate, the RBI easings. And that's, I guess, at some point of time, the Farm Act will also be considered a great reform, though it's going through its pangs at the moment. It will come back in some form or the other. If you look at our economy, it's on a fairly strong recovery path from our point of view. And this, I guess, will really come out very well. The stock market is booming, as you've seen. The revenues are a bit down, but the EBITDA margins are at its peak at an average. If you see, it's about 19.4%. The Nifty is also right on top. And in many ways, more than one, you feel that some way, some good optimism is back into the society per se. If you get into the union budget, which is the era of extremes, is supposed to lead into that, I have a feeling that as a budget, it's a blockbuster budget. But in certain aspects, the finance minister has been cautious not to give out everything that she is aware of. She has announced a revenue of about 22 crores. But in our internal calculations, we frankly feel, in spite of taking disinvestment and such, there could still be much more revenue that could accrue into the central government as we go forward. And that could be in the range of 3 to 4 lakh crores. So it's a budget which has been very conservative in our view from stating the revenues. And this is from many aspects of calculations. Of course, to some extent, it depends on the disinvestment process, but I guess that is always the case. And if one organization is partly disinvested, which is Life Insurance Corporation, much of the money gets back into the government. There's also potential for higher tax collections, GST especially, because much of the incomes would get back next year, which was not there this year due to 6 months of non-working. And therefore, it's a positive sign. The expenditures have been well controlled. Maybe some aspects of defense has also been very well taken care of, because a lot of money must have gone into the Chinese border. And there has been a reasonable show of spending by the central government and especially the public sector enterprises, especially on the metal and oil and gas side. One of the best part of the budget is a huge allocation to capital expenditure, nearly 11 lakh odd crores. And quite a bit of it benefits the infrastructure sector in a large way. Huge spending on railways, roads, oil and gas, housing, urban affairs, power, and support for the national infrastructure pipeline, water, health, and so on and so forth. I think this is an unimaginable feat that has been put into action in the budget, because one needs to see how finally the ministries catch up to it and ensure spending of this huge outlay that has been put in front of them, because the success of the budget is going to finally depend on that. In terms of real infrastructure development to make ourselves efficient. There's a massive spending going on in railways. The during the year, I feel during the next financial year, I feel the dedicated freight corridor connecting Delhi and to a certain extent the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust called the Western Freight Corridor, the Eastern Freight Corridor connecting Delhi to Howrah, and finally maybe the Howrah to Mundra Port, which connects the east and west of the country. And these are goods trains which can travel at 130, 140 kilometers per hour, carrying up to 37.5 tons of weight in one particular carriage or rolling stock. These are amazing developments. After some time, the government also decided to go ahead with the high-speed corridor connecting Ahmedabad to Mumbai. And work has started on that project in real earnestness. Of course, it's work in progress for another 3-4 years before it is completed. Many measures have also been announced to progress on further such projects. As such, if you see, the spending mix has improved. There's been more capex. The budget support for NIP is really encouraging. The new idea of national monetization pipeline is an extremely interesting topic, which is to monetize the road assets, even to monetize certain railway assets. And the minister also spoke about monetizing the dedicated freight corridor as an asset. These are extremely interesting concepts because if it comes through, it will bring in efficiency and bring in money into the government's pocket for spending further on infrastructure capex. The government is also talking about technology of the future. The National Hydrogen Mission is a fantastic way to look forward because at the end of the day, the world is talking about green energy, whether it's solar, whether it's carbon capture, whether it is removal of SOx and NOx from the air, whether it is hydrogen, whether it is EV batteries. I think these are things of the future. And this will also help the nation per se because it reduces our dependence on import of crude oil because we are quite heavily dependent on that and a lot of forex goes into it. These are things which are still slightly costlier than a typical source of fuel that we get. But at the end of the day, these are bound to come in. In Saudi Arabia, for example, there's a new city being created called Neom on the Red Sea area. The entire city is going to be powered by solar, wind, and hydrogen. More or less, the entire city is connected underground between Neom and another place called Red Sea City. And clusters of small cities are coming around it. These are ulterior concepts. That means there's no traffic on the road. Everything is underground. It's all e-vehicles. It's all e-Complay. And maybe you don't have to pay for anything. It's all payment through mobile or whatever. It's absolutely new concept. This changes the way we look at cities. And they're also planning to put a hydrolysis plant, make hydrogen, convert it into ammonia, transport it to Europe, reconvert it back into hydrogen, and use it as a fuel. These are the ideas that are really of the future, and we need to start thinking about it, and that the government has taken the first step is extremely interesting. The huge forex reserves are interesting, $590 billion. And that is, for the first time, we are sort of surplus. The money in hand is greater than the money that we spend. The corporate bond market is taking baby steps, and creation of the permanent institutional framework to purchase investment-grade debt securities, both in stress as well as in normal times, will help deepen the market. Health is wealth, as we all know, and the budget has given due importance to this age-old adage. And good to see the allocation therein. Budget revenue estimates, as I said, seems to be conservative, and I guess that will serve its own purpose. Overall, the key thing here is how the budget is implemented, how the budget is finally pushed through, and how effective the machinery is to make it work. We finally feel there's a government that's working. And it's an apolitical statement. Don't take it in any other way. Whether it's Arogya Setu, whether it is rural electricity scheme. I don't know how many of you have traveled recently between Kolkata and Delhi. If you travel 10 years back, you'll find a lot of dark patches. Today, if you fly, it's as good as flying between Chennai and Bangalore, or Delhi and Chandigarh, or Chennai and Coimbatore, or something like that. It's fully lighted. Just as an organization, we have lighted more than 65,000 villages. We have brought it down to 11 kV, taken to 220 volts, provided a bulb and a fan in every house. This is just one organization. There are many others doing it. huge amount of water supply schemes have happened, including taking lift water and taking it down to individual houses and doing the last mile connectivity so that people don't have to travel miles to collect, water. And quite a few projects have been done by ourselves, and we know what it is. And therefore, I feel the positiveness of how to go about life, the quality of life, and the positiveness of how to go about by life is much better today than any time else. And if we can, as a nation and as a group of people, capitalize on this and synchronize it to do something better, I think we step onto the era of extremes to take India to where it ought to be from a positive point of view. The budget, I believe, with this huge infrastructure spend, if it happens and if it is implemented well, as I said, will create projects and thereby will create jobs, which is putting money into people's hand. And that means spending, and creates a circular economy where you earn, spend, and thereby there's a consumption economy that comes up, which is good. To conclude my speech, it is an era of extremes, but I feel we are on positives of the extremes. And if we can sort of organize ourselves, and pandemic has made us little disciplined and made us little conscious about how to go about life in a more careful, calibrated manner. And if we can do that, both with the economy, with implementation, and with positivities that come out of it, I think it will be a great way forward from many and all points of view. Thank you all very much for this short speech that I could give on the era of extremes. I hope it was interesting. I hope you see the context and the manner in which that I came about it was made sense. Once again, thank all of you for the opportunity, especially Meenakshi Ramesh, Mr. Mahalingam, and Mr. Lakshminarayan. Thank you all very much.